Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are so pleased to have you joining us. Um, we are thrilled to have our speakers here today from Toronto, Canada, joining us. And they're here for hopefully you're here for the right webinar. It's a Canadian long-term care reinvention, the small house model at St. Clair O'Connor Community. And we are all eager to learn all about the great work that's been done at St. Clair. One little bit of business that I will mention, if you have any questions or comments, you are welcome to put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that, probably addressing those at the end of the webinar. So don't panic if we don't respond right away to you, but please share with us your thoughts as well as your questions. If you are seeking nursing home administrator continuing education units in the US, then you'll want to be sure at the end of the event to click on the link that will show up when you sign out of the webinar for a short, very short post-conference evaluation. We would love all of you to complete the evaluation because we want to know how we're doing, but it is absolutely required if you want your continuing education. And we'll remind you about that at the end as well. And I think that's about all the business because I think we're all eager to get to hear what Catherine and Aldred have to share with us. So let us turn it over to them.
Okay. It's a pleasure. I'm Aldred Neufeldt, and I'm here presenting with Kathy Schalk on what we've been working at here at the St. Clair O'Connor Community. So if we go to the next slide, please. It's a pleasure to join Kathy in this. And it's about our vision to challenge the stigma of people with long-term care needs by integrating them within a community of ordinary individuals and families. It takes basically the small house idea to another level. And my task will be to speak to the context, and Kathy will speak to the what. Next slide, please. So I'd like to welcome you, our participants. You may well be from around the world. I noticed somebody from the UK was in the list. Welcome one and all. My guess is, and I believe this will be right, that we're mostly from the USA and Canada. So I'm going to speak as if these two cultural contexts are central to what we're doing, but understanding that in other cultures around the world, there will be similarities. Now to context. If we are all from one country, one culture, one would assume that we have the same understanding of words. And of course, since we're cross-cultural, that's not necessarily so. So while Americans and Canadians, for example, share a dominant language of English, there's background music at play that influences how we think and how we understand and how we behave things. So we'll start now from thinking about stigma and long-term care. Now, this stigma and long-term care is really quite a universal phenomenon. It's not limited to Canada or the USA, but in my experience, it's true basically around the world. And even in our enlightened era, it's the negative imagery of aging and disability is largely disparate. Even the archetype of the wise elder, which is a widely held positive stereotype, like all stereotypes, is really vastly oversimplified and has a negative underbelly. And then when you attach disability of some kind or another with cognitive and aging, then the potential for stigma multiplies. Next slide, please. I became aware of stigma early on in my career. You can tell by my hair and my beard, I'm not a young person anymore. I entered the mental health field 60 years ago this year with a PhD in my pocket. in the province of Saskatchewan, which had been and that is or has been was the pioneering group in Canada to introduce things like universal health care, which we've got. And Saskatchewan too pioneered in the mental health system, starting in the post-war years when several psychiatrists came to Saskatchewan in the Tommy Douglas era, and we had a social democratic government at the time wanting to make sure that people were being appropriately served, and they thought asylums were absolutely terrible. And when I entered the field, I was convinced of the same. So I was mentored by pioneers in that context, and my job was to then document the progress in moving out of institutions and into community services. And in the process, I learned to know pioneers of community mental health in the US as well. And there, for those of you that are Americans, you might find it of interest that the pioneering mental health work, much of it was done by people who'd been serving as volunteers, Mennonite boys off the fields, serving in mental hospitals, in asylums during Second World War, replacing staff that weren't there. And they decided that going home, people in their congregations ought not to be sent to asylums. They needed to do something in the community. So that was a context that in the US triggered a response there. And again, started in the late 1940s, early 1950s when that started. And in Saskatchewan, we closed the first mental hospital in North America by the mid-1960s, and about the same time or shortly thereafter, that also happened in California, all of which I had become intimately aware with in my time there. Then in the 1970s, I was invited to help shape a Canada-wide campaign to create community alternatives for people with developmental disabilities. And they too were at the time largely consigned to residential institutions. The typical doctor would say to a family birthing a child with Down syndrome, "You can't look after this. He or she will never amount to anything. You may as well send her to the asylum." And parents were opposed against that and developed this Canada-wide campaign that I was invited to lead and shape and lead. And then in the 1980s, I got involved with the independent living movement, which invited my participation more. And so in that whole frame, one learns about disability and stigma and how it ought to be diminished. Next slide, please. Next. What we learned in that time were four things. One is that any residential housing where people don't have an option to leave is vulnerable to abuse and depersonalizing its inhabitants. All you have to do is compare what happened in asylums, for example, or in Canada, we're very conscious of schools for people, Indigenous kids, about the abuse that took place there. All we have to do is compare that to how dormitories at universities operate. It's just that people have the opportunity to leave if they don't like it in a dormitory, in institutions where you can't leave, abuse almost invariably occurs. Secondly, it matters how we think about disability, the lenses we have. And again, this is not particularly new. You probably all know this. By a medical way of looking at things, it's a health issue. If it's or charity, it's a tragedy and needs some kind of often charitable but not particularly helpful response, and so on. Economics has to do with costs and benefits. So we know this that the lenses we have as professionals make a big difference. Next slide. Third thing we learned is back up. Back up one more. The third thing we learned was that our vision of what ought to be matters. In our professional training, we kind of learn that really professionals. Next slide. There's a part two to this. One more. There, our vision, right? Thank you. in our learnings at universities, we get the impression that it's the professional who learns how to do the significant changes, and we know what to do and how to do it, and any change will happen as a result of research. Well, if you look at the facts, it ain't so. The reality is that basically most professional training deals with knowledge that's been gained in the past, is not forward-looking. There's always this question of what's happening. And what we know in all of the places, when I talked about mental health changes or I talked about disability changes, it had to do with people having a vision that things ought to be better. And we need to be able to support people. And then people have a particular idea of how to pursue them. So community mental health, or developing community alternatives for people with developmental disabilities, or independent living for people with sight impairments or motor impairments, those were visionary constructs, and was people involved with disability that could shape them. So the vision is absolutely critical. Finally, it matters if we think only of individuals or of individuals in relationship to normal community. And with rare exception, the latter is the better way. To individualize only leaves people short. Now, not to be overlooked is something that is the cultural DNA in which we grow up. It operates at a subconscious level. And it's one of the things where one of the phenomena that lends itself to misunderstandings between people of different countries. It's our common understanding of what my nation, your nation is that we grew up with. And it's captured, you see the words there, in our respective constitutions, as in the USA, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In Canada, it's peace, order, and good government. Now imagine the similarities and differences between how that might play itself out. Next slide. Though we share many commonalities, it's not hard to distinguish between us. And so Europeans will tell us if we're traveling there, they can tell an American contrasted to a Canadian just by watching us a little bit. And that's largely true. And so there are these ways Americans behave on average differently than Canadians do in similar contexts. And that's true for people from other cultures as well. We each have our own way of behavior that others can pick up on. How we think about rights, for example, really plays this out. USA construct, the American construct of right, is profoundly individualistic to the exclusion of the group. In Canada, the group rights are as important as individual rights. So, for example, the idea that a person might be able to sue a university for admission to a school of medicine because his or her grades are better than those of students admitted for affirmative action reasons, that can happen in the US, does happen there, doesn't happen in Canada. So that's how it gets shaped. So our cultural DNAs are important. And that's useful to keep in mind as we think about whether it's what we're doing today, but also as we think about each other's programs around the world. Next slide, please. Now, the small hooks idea. So far, we've had a tendency to think about the small house most recently as the greenhouse model, but it wasn't the first off the block. The efforts to reimagine long-term care as requiring a small-scale, person-centered approach began in the early 80s, and it began in the United States. And some of you may know Dorothy Coons at the University of Michigan. Sadly, she died in the late 1990s, but she shaped a place called Wesley Hall, a 15-person small house for people with dementias. And she was joined by Shelley Weaver Dick. And they experimented with housing 15 people with dementia using person-centered approaches that were based on the learnings out of the developmental disability field. So that was, to my knowledge, the first small house approximation. Then in the late 1990s, Sewell and Beatty in Saskatoon had this brilliant idea of why not take one of two groups, plus long-term care facilities she had some responsibility for, and rebuild it into a cluster of small homes for 8 to 10 persons. And in both in Wesley Hall experience and in the Sherbrooke Center in Saskatoon, the residential experience, the people living there just immensely changed. So I had videos of what happened in Wesley Hall, for example, and I served on the doctoral committee of Shelley Weaver Dick, who documented the phenomena, the change in Wesley Hall. And people with severe dementia were behaving in normal ways that they hadn't, in a small house context, that they hadn't been doing elsewhere. And so those were really predecessors. And the greenhouse model, of course, has become very prominent here in North America, and that's absolutely, I'm delighted to see it. That it behooves us to remember what that history is. That's the next slide. So to talk about now St. Clair O'Connor Community, it was founded in 1983 as an intergenerational independent living community with a vision of promoting community and meaningful engagement as people age. And so when we founded it, and I was one of the founders, we thought of this as 1/3 under the age of 60 and 2/3 over 60. And then we included a small long-term care home into that. And with respect to long-term care home, we adopted the Wesley Hall model program principles for ours. In fact, Shelley Weaver Dick came and trained our personnel at the time. The core principles that we're rooted in had to do with a faith-based understanding on the importance of community for healthy living. To declare myself, I am a Mennonite, and we're founded as a Mennonite enterprise. And the second one, it was informed by scientific research, challenging the separation of individuals based on care level as both artificial and isolated. So we don't have separate assisted living housing or separate whatever housing, rent to income housing. It's all integrated. Over to Kathy.
All right, next slide. So before I start, I really need to do a shout out to my tribe that are on. I see all kinds of familiar Canadians. So I just wanted to shout out to the Riverview group. Hello, hi Genevieve. Jessica Lou Kim, I know you're on. Thank you for supporting. And I saw Rudy Friesen on. So that's some of my tribe, my Canadian tribe from across Canada. Anyway, I know, shameless, I know. So the main characteristics between it's the medical model versus the social model. So small house model is definitely more of a social model where there are regular warehousing of elders in larger facilities is so medical and so focused on the disease and not the person. In the small house model, we tend to put the decision making closest to the people it affects. And that's an Eden thing, but I think it happens naturally also in that small house model. Dining in the large institutional models is there's very little control for the elders on what goes on their plate. It's a dining room service where in the small house model, it's a family style. So, you can pass the potatoes, and if you like potatoes, you take 2 scoops. And so it's, a lot more control. And if you keep in mind, we're working towards that elder directed care. And so we want to do everything where people have control over their own life. The big thing that stands out is if you walk into a 32 person neighborhood in a big establishment. Prominently right out front is that nurses station. And everything seems to be built around that nurses station. Where in the small house model, the workstations would be secluded and hidden, and it's not about the people who work there. They work in someone's home, so why not make it more home-like? Next slide, please. So there are limitations to current small house models, and I'll tell you, our Canadian Ontario legislation is a big part of that limitation. To date, small homes have been created by or within existing housing complexes devoted to serving seniors in isolation from a larger community. I'm going to talk in later slides about how our model is a little bit different than that. And while small houses have a very positive effect, it still does not diminish the stigma of receiving supportive care and specialized housing. And we often refer to it here as a ghetto. So next slide. So our focus here is on dignity and independence. And we have a commitment to nurturing vibrant and inclusive communities, and our design assists us with this. So in our design, and that is one of our architectural renderings. So we refer to it as a tower, but it really doesn't look like a tower. But on 6 of those floors is a small house that would have 8 people who require long-term care assistance. But then the rest of those floors would be, it might be affordable housing, it might be market rental. We have 2 floors of community space. We have some retail space so that we're actually our own little community. And this building is actually will be attached to the original St. Clair O'Connor, making us one larger community. But we definitely, our spaces are very thoughtfully designed. Next slide. So you can just see here, it's a bit of a side look at it. Our building has been designed with lots of space for outdoor access. We are hoping to have childcare here within our confines. We don't currently have that, but what we are doing this summer is we did get a grant to run a children's day camp here. So it's an intergenerational children's day camp. So we're hoping to present that next year. Next slide. So our small house model, it will have 6 floors with a small house. Each small house would have 8 people who require long-term care. In each house, there will be 8 private bedrooms, and each bedroom actually has an ensuite washroom complete with a shower. So it's none of this getting your house coat on and traveling down the hall to a shower room. Your shower would be right there. Staff to resident ratio in this model is 1:4. So with the 8 elders that would live in the small house, it would be 2 staff. And the 2 staff are like a multitasking staff. So they would have the food handlers course, they'd be a PSW, they'd be trained for medication management, and they would also be trained in IPAC and housekeeping procedures. And so that's a 1:4 ratio, which is actually very good. I've come from the 80s where we had 1:15, 1 staff to 15. So we're really kind of creating this great thing here. And the other thing about this is that it gives us the ability to foster not only a relationship, but a sense of community. And community is what it's all about, and finding your joy and finding your tribe. Um, the each house does operate independently, and there will be a full service kitchen. So all of the food will be cooked there, and it's normal to smell food cooking in your house and to have people be able to be involved with food preparation if they so choose. And to get up in the morning and see the menu and decide that that's not what they want today, and to be able to change on a dime. That's life at home, and that's how we all live. And then, we still, under our regulations, we still have to have 24/7 RN. The 24/7 RN would float between the 6 houses, and they would be responsible for, some of the higher care needs and doing some assessments. And then somehow we have to work in dietary. We don't have all of the answers yet, but in Ontario, we are prescribed dietary. So if anybody's got suggestions, send them my way. Next slide, please. So this is a floor plan. So the yellow piece of it, that's our actually on the floor, that's the long-term care small house. And so if you look at the green space, that's all apartments. So each floor has a mix of a small house. So the small house has a front door and a front porch, just like every other house. And then the apartments are part of the community that would surround them. We've tried to build outdoor space on every small house. So our elders will have access to gardening if they want to do it, or barbecuing outside, or whatever suits them in that day. We have negotiated. It took us a year to get approval from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care here in Ontario. They wouldn't back down on a tub room, so we have a tub room in an institutional tub room in every small house, which we're not built yet, so we might be able to get that changed. We are advocating. Where we didn't back down, though, was the medication rooms. My house does not have a medication room. So I had to write a whole procedure in our operations plan about serving residents on a tray their medications, which anybody that was around in the 70s and 80s as a nurse, that was the way it was done. We didn't have medication cards. So we're sort of taking it back. Next slide. So there's a good case to be made for mixed use development. So anybody that's involved in long-term care in Ontario knows that building long-term care under the 2015 regs is very, very expensive. So number one, to have a mixed use development is healthier, in our opinion, healthier for the people who live it, both the young and the elders. Because part of growing older is not only receiving care, but giving care. So, we really do promote that. We really like the intergenerational and inclusive living. We learn from each other. So the older learn from the young, but the young learn from the older too. And it's a 50-50 proposition. Diversified funding opportunities. So that's where it's really helpful. So with having a mixed use development, we actually have more pots to draw from for funding. It also, because the city of Toronto is definitely interested in what we're doing. So just, to be very clear about our development. So we finally got Ministry of Health approval to build after arm wrestling for almost a year. We got them to see it our way, although not in every way. And so now we're with the city of Toronto. And so the city of Toronto is actually very pleased with our design. And of course, as soon as they see housing, they're all for it. So we're working through that. but it opens the door to us for more funding and like sources like the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation and the City of Toronto, the Troyum Fund. So those things wouldn't be available for just long-term care. It gives us an enhanced operational sustainability. So we have operational revenue from lots of sources. And you know, as Aldred talked about earlier, like when you're in a building like this, every door is the same, so there's no stigma. So you don't know one door from the next who's getting rent geared to income. You know, our long-term care doors will be the same. So it sort of helps with that stigma of that communal living. It's an efficient land use, especially in Toronto, where land is not plentiful. So hence the building up. We're trying to win our neighbors over right now through community consultation. And then it's a community anchor and economic stimulus for our neighborhood. So, you know, with a bigger building comes more jobs. And then we'll have some retail space and community space. So we're hoping to get our neighborhood in and be part of what we do, a part of who we are. Next slide. So I think I've probably talked a lot about already advantages. The small house outcomes, it helps retain staff. We don't have any stats here yet, but I know I've had lengthy conversations with Sue and Beatty from Saskatoon, and I know that's one of the things that they've noticed is that staff want to stay because they have these relationships. And and the other thing we're already seeing, so one of the first things we took away as one of our Eden projects is we have encouraged our staff not to wear uniforms. And we've seen a decrease in behaviors already, or unmet needs, because you know, we've taken that power away, or what's seen as power anyway. The intimate home-like environment of a small house is associated with improved quality of life for residents, but it's also an improved workplace for our people who work. And those people who work in long-term care, you know, they have a calling, a bigger calling. So having them in the small house model where they actually see the same people day in and day out, and they have that relationship, they become family. We'll also, you know, a big push in Ontario is the decreased use of psychotropic drugs. And I know Sue Ellen has said numerous times that they've been able to decrease theirs, and increase social engagement scores, which, you know, we hope to do too. Small houses promote greater resident autonomy so that they are actually part of the household and they actually have some say in how the house is run. Some of our challenges, of course, is the regulatory and licensing challenges. They haven't caught up with us. They don't know what to do with us. They're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. We're the square peg and trying to fit into their 2015 regulations. So, but slowly but surely, hopefully we can change that in Ontario. I know it's changing a little bit in Manitoba. I know Sue Ellen just keeps you know, going ahead with, and I know Sue Ellen is retired, so it's Kim in Sherbrooke now, but they're doing great things still. It is definitely it's a higher initial investment. It's a lot more expensive to build what we're building, but we see it as it's doing the right thing for people that we should be caring for. Smaller facilities will definitely struggle with bulk purchasing, but we think we'll be big enough that, excuse me, that we should be okay. Next slide. So Part of the advantage of small house models is that enhanced infection control. If you have a neighborhood with 32 residents and you get an influenza outbreak, you're guaranteed to have probably 28 of 32 will get the influenza. And then there's that whole thing of making sure that your staff are kept separate. And in the small house, if you get an outbreak, definitely, it may go through the 8, but the staff are secluded to that area. So definitely a better model for infection control. I think I mentioned before the increased staff satisfaction and retention. And stronger staff resident relationships. And at the end of the day, relationship-based care is what it's all about. And we're hoping to see some increased government funding or subsidies for our innovative care model. The challenge is it may be a little bit harder to recruit. I know currently in the province of Ontario, it is definitely hard to recruit for almost any position. Toronto is not as bad as, where I come from. I come from Listowel, Ontario. For those of you who know that area, I saw Denise Bernard on. She definitely knows Listowel, Ontario. Recruiting in those areas is far more difficult than it is in Toronto. But retaining staff once they're on, it's good, Kyle. I know Palmerston well. Lack of public awareness. So in Ontario and in Canada, the small house model is not as recognized. Everybody knows what the greenhouse model is in the States, but we're still pioneering here for that small house model. And so it's getting that word out there that it probably is better, and getting our legislation changed a little bit or a better understanding of how to work around the legislation. Next slide. So navigating the ministry, there's not too much to say that I haven't already said. They were dealing with people in the ministry who everything's the letter of the law, and they don't have a lot of give and take. Like you really, really do have to arm wrestle to get what you need. So I've built up my muscles over the year. They all say that we want, a better quality of life and they want things non-institutional, but our regulations really don't give a lot of leeway for that. There's a lot of duplication of amenities. Building 6 tub rooms for 48 people is ridiculous. It's an inefficient use of space. The staff office requirements is also ridiculous because it institutionalizes that home concept. The institutional standards for equipment, we're trying to make a home, not an institution. And then there is a part of the regulations is that strict separation between long-term care and non-long-term care. So we have done some workarounds. We've visited some homes that do have other levels of care in their community, and so they've got they use a glass partition so you can see. We're not built yet, so we'll see if we can get things changed between now and then. But we're not trying to keep people in a bubble. We're trying to let people live. Next slide. So yeah, I've talked about the tub rooms, which just drives me crazy. The staff offices drive me a little bit crazy. We have an office in someone's home. The large equipment, so the medication carts, we did get around that one. The physical separation, we're still looking to get around that. So our architects, we've given them that challenge. And And the big thing right now is the garbage chutes. So as it is right now in our building, it seems like a crazy little thing to everyone, but we need garbage chutes in a 10-story building. So we're not going to be able to have garbage chutes from our long-term care home, from our small houses. So staff are going to have to take garbage up and down into the garbage room. So it's not that big a deal. And then that's the other thing is we've had to design with a separate elevator that goes just to long-term care, doesn't stop anywhere else, which is absolutely ludicrous, but here we are. Next slide. So that's our conclusion. So that's our door. And is that the door of a long-term care home, or is that the door of, someone who's on rent geared to income, or is that the door of someone who just rents here on an independent basis? You don't know. By design, our community lessens the stigma associated with communal living and the need for care. In our reinvention, every door is the same, whether family living independently or in a small home of people with long-term care support needs. And living in a community with all ages provides the antidote to loneliness, helplessness, and boredom. Everyone both gives and receives care. And I think that is our end. Any questions? You're muted, Joan.
But I'm so sorry. I came back, but not quite all the way. How wonderful. I'm so inspired. I'm so excited about so much of what you shared. You do have a question here, and there's still a chance for people to ask more. The question is, which type of dietary service will work better, in your opinion, to provide therapeutic and cultural foods according to preferences?
So I think the small house model, it opens a lot of leeway into the house, because we are a multicultural. We're not only multi-generational, we're a multicultural building. And so if you're only cooking for 8 people, the 8 people have a little more say in what we're cooking. Yes, we still will have to follow regulations and have dietitian approved menus, but we have a little more ability to veer from those menus. And if we have someone that's East Indian living in a house with 3 or 4 different nationalities, we're able to mix it up, and also a little bit more of we might have curry, and someone in the house may say, oh, I can't eat curry. But then we have that ability to make them whatever they want. When it's only for 8 people, it opens it up so much more. And the intent in our house is for everyone to sit around a table and to pass the dishes. And that's the intent. And to smell the food cooking.
Oh, wonderful. What a great opportunity for everybody. We are getting more questions coming in now. So here's the next one. Starts out with a thanks for a great presentation. So I want to share that. And it's a comment and a question. Might one approach to the tub room requirement be reimagining it as a fully accessible spa type wellness room designed with residents and frontline staff both?
So we actually, initially, we wanted to put 2 spas in the tower. So if you preferred a bath over a shower, that you would travel to the spa and it would be a spa experience, but they're making us put one in every room. But yes, we are looking at a spa. I just don't want to build 6 of them.
Yeah, always challenges. We have another question here. This one is, what are your next, this is a big one. What are your next steps? And what about scaling and replication? And a thank you.
So we, as I said, our basic design is complete. We have ministry approval. We're right now getting working with the city. So we've been very fortunate. We have some great advocates. Our local MPP is a huge advocate for us. one of our city councilors in our neighborhood is a city planner by design. So, and he's a huge advocate for housing. So we're very fortunate to have those people in our part of our tribe. So once we get the city approvals, then we'll go gung ho to finish up all of the drawings with our architects. We're hoping to have shovel in the ground next summer. And I'm impatient. I would have liked it this summer, but I didn't expect I'd have to arm wrestle for a whole year. And then it's probably a 4 to 5 year building process. So hopefully by 2030.
Just might add to that, I chair the board, and one of the things that the board, of course, is concerned about is financial feasibility. So we are in the process of right in the midst of doing a pro forma on financial feasibility, and having a couple of sets of eyes on that, and that no doubt will shape some of what we've been talking about, but fundamentally not. The concept will stay the same. The question is, do we get bigger or not? So who knows? It might be a 15-story tower. Probably won't be less than 10.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing what that ends up being. I have to say before I get to the next question, your pioneering spirit and your sheer tenacity is just inspiring.
Well, Aldred and I are the dreamers. We don't really care much about money, but fortunately we have people behind us that do. So
there you go. There's always somebody that'll take care of that part for you. Well, we have a couple more questions. How do you select multi-generational and multi-income residents in the entire building? Who coordinates selection and meets differing needs?
So in long-term care, our long-term care system is that we don't have a whole lot of choice about who comes in. We don't manage those wait lists. So we do try and look for fit. As far as coming into our community, we do have a process. Do you want to speak to that, Aldred? Because it's community.
Yeah. What we have is a process that invites people to apply to come here. And the fundamental interest is, do people agree with our values of belonging to and contributing to the community? And so that's part of the intake. And part of the intake then also has to do with people's age and their capabilities and so on. We're trying to keep, one of the problems of time is people age, and with age comes infirmity. And so we're always watching to try to make sure that we're getting the younger population coming in, so that and that they can fit into the ethos of the place and so on. So we have a process to manage that, and we're just going through the routine the process right now as a board and as staff to think about how do we update that and make sure it's working better than it has been.
Thank you. And a couple more questions. Does the personal support worker have responsibility for taking residents outside of the home, things like shopping and going to parks?
No. That would be, and I say that it's a no. However, it doesn't mean that there aren't bus trips and those opportunities where they might go out with program people. The personal support worker, because we're a 4-on-1, would never be expected to go out. Like, we need to have people in the house, but there would be opportunities for them to go out. Just like any long-term care home, we may send them in a bus or transit that would be accessible to people. So right now, no, but however, that may change. We do have, we have a tea room right now where staff will bring a group of residents down for coffee or tea in our tea room. So those kinds of things do happen in the facility, but we don't send them out right now.
Well, thank you. And I think some comments. What are your lessons learned on the minimal standards that should be included in a small house that should be considered in designing and building the multi-unit building?
So I don't have a whole lot of lessons yet because we're not built. I know we have, I think we've negotiated very well with the Ministry of Health. So lessons learned there is, you need to know which hill you're prepared to die on. For me, it was medication carts and medication rooms. Top rooms was one, but that was a losing. I wasn't going to win that one, but we do have people advocating right now for us on that. It's persistence pays off.
If
And
you have a vision, you should pursue it with persistence.
tenacity. But St. Clair O'Connor has been around for almost 45 years, and it has been a multi-generational, multicultural home for 45 years. So, the model works well. I don't, I don't know how much we'd want to change.
Not the fundamentals.
No.
That's good to hear. And I love that, I love so many of your answers have been, this is what we're doing now. Who knows?
Yeah.
What the future exactly will bring. You had, wow, the comments are coming in. We have a comment from Sharon, and I hope I don't want to say your last name incorrectly, but she says a retired licensing inspector and surveyor in the US, and I would have loved working with you two to make this happen. So
Tell her, come on up.
And John said a very visionary design could be a model for, and I apologize on this one, Keiko? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
I don't know.
Okay, well, I'm joined in that. So John, we don't quite know the answer to that question, but if you want to pop in some clarification, you're welcome to. Kyle, I asked the question, what do you find are the biggest barriers in the current long-term care legislation and regulations? And then he went on to say, given the Ontario government has an ambitious goal of 38,000 new renovated long-term care beds, has there been a discussion between SCOC and the ministry on further pilot as part of the building out of this long-term care expansion? I'll stop the question with that part right now.
So what I will tell you is we negotiated long and hard to get where we're at this point. Every small house model article that comes along, I send it to them. Because I think part of it is educating. The model that we're doing, so in Ontario, where we have for-profit and not-for-profit, the small house model is probably not as profitable as what the traditional 32 people neighborhoods are. But the reason they use 32, for all of you in Ontario, you'll know this, it's for staffing ratios because it's divisible by 8. So that's how our 8 works in here. But sorry, can you repeat the rest of the question? Because I've veered off.
Yeah, and there's more to it. Given the Ontario government has an ambitious goal of 38,000 new renovated long-term care beds, has there been a discussion between SCOC and the ministry on further pilot as part of building out the long-term care expansion?
Well, there really hasn't been an interest that we've been able to detect from the ministry to think about pilots. So I was just going to add to this. The resistance we're finding in bureaucracy here is not atypical. When I was with the metal retardation movement across Canada, we ran into exactly the same thing. How do we close down large residential institutions and create community alternatives? There are all sorts of reasons why within the policy sector and in the funding sector, they said, well, it's not possible. Well, we got money committed to building more large buildings with more ghettos, right? Well, that's what we're seeing with the proposal for 38,000 beds. They're all about building ghettos. And the question from, I would say as a citizen, is that wise money spent? Because we know given the age of population is going to diminish quite dramatically in the next 25 years or so. So we're going to have a lot of empty spaces because who's going to want to live in those large residential institutions? So to me, but it's a barrier that has to be worked at. So that's where persistence is important.
Yeah, no. And I think having people with vision as you have is just what we need. And you're going to want to connect. You're going to want to connect with Kyle Reburn, and we can help make that happen. Who goes on to ask about the principles and designs, what are must-haves in the small house model versus what can be compromised. And I know you've talked a little bit about that already. But she also said there are many of these models operating across Canada. How can we work together on this project? Some of my colleagues heard you speak at the Advantage Age Conference, and there are certainly some synergies. So you have some here.
Be part of our tribe. We're starting to build a huge network in Canada. Definitely the Sherbrooke group, Riverview group. We had we were able to present last fall in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so I think Winnipeg's probably going to crawl ahead of all of us, but all of us have to be on the same page, singing from the same songbook. So.
And we will certainly make that connection to make sure that you can
absolutely
reach out to each other. We have one last question before our time together is up. Just will the residents in the apartments have a priority for long-term care if they were to need it?
No. So our Ontario system is that we have an outside government source, which is Ontario Home Health, actually dictates who. However, if we have someone that's lived in our community for 15 years, we'll go to bat and advocate, and we have been successful so that they remain at home here. So unfortunately, that's the way our system is.
There's the official and then there's the unofficial.
Yeah.
We won't put you on the spot for that one. We want you to keep on doing the work you're doing. So we'll keep it. I with just one last comment, and I think we all share this. This is from Jessica Lou Kim. Thank you for sharing your vision and journey thus far and challenging the way we have traditionally designed communities. Keep up the good work. So Catherine and Aldred, thank you so very much for sharing this. All of you, don't leave just yet. I'm going to give you one little bit of technical, and then Susan is going to join me because we got a couple really exciting things we want to share with you. The technical is, again, it's about those crazy CEUs. So if you're a nursing home administrator and want CEs, be sure you complete that post-webinar eval that's going to pop up on your screen. And if you have an R number for NAB, and if you're an administrator, you know what that means. Be sure to include that with your information. And that said, we would hang on just a minute. We've got some really exciting things that Susan and I would like to share with you. So Janet, if you could pop up that slide. Don't anybody go away yet?
Yeah, and I really want to add my gratitude to both Aldred and Kathy. This was really tremendous. And Aldred, you kind of started us off with how we think and what the lens by which we are looking at things. I think the other thing that really struck me is the persistence and the pursuit of the vision for something better. And it's a relentless pursuit. So I just commend you for what you are doing and being such trailblazers and really holding fast to that. I think the other thing that I want to say, we have obviously attracted a global group on this call. I saw somebody from Australia who it's 5 a.m. where she is. And so I'm appreciative of all of our international friends that have joined us for today. And really, we're all in this together and that we're learning, we're growing, because aging is something that's occurring globally. And we are all here to figure out what those dignified, humane, beautiful models are. So thank you for sharing your story. I'm excited for our conference, which will be in St. Louis, August 11 to 14. And it really is that opportunity. Kathy, you kept talking about your tribe and that there is this Canadian tribe. I believe there's a global tribe of change makers and people that really want to go forward. So I think this is the conference for the tribe. And I encourage all of my fellow tribe, members of the tribe, to join us in St. Louis. And I want to especially give a very warm welcome to our international friends. In fact, we have a discount code for those that would be able to attend the conference in person, it would give you $150 off of the early bird registration. And I'll ask Janet to put that code in the chat box so that you can use that code. If you are an international person that would like to attend our conference, that code is for you. And secondly, what I'd like to say, if you're not able to be there in person, we do have a live stream option. Janet had put the link to our conference website, which would give you information about registering so that you can at least attend. And we have our general sessions that will be available to you via live stream. Joan, I'm going to let you kind of go to the next one to talk about webinars coming up.
Just kind of share this. We're so pleased to, for the second year now, offer our, actually it's more than the second year, offer our pre-conference webinar series. So it's a way to get more knowledge and information and sharing because there's so many people doing such phenomenal work. So obviously you experience that now. And we do have 3 more coming up. You'll see them here on the sheet, and I won't spend a lot of time going over that because I know you can all read. But Janet, you want to pop to the next one because the most important one is what's coming up next. And so that is on Wednesday, July 9th. And it's building a solid foundation for purposeful living and memory care, the 3-legged stool. And that's with some very good friends of Center for Innovation, Jeff McSpadden and Tara Johnson. So that's another wonderful opportunity for you to learn and grow and share some great things together. Go ahead and move on. There we go. This is for you, Susan.
Yeah, so I'm really excited because we're coming to Canada in October. And to really fuel this movement, it's important to us that, we talk to you, reference Sue Ellen Beatty and Sherbrooke many times in your conversation, your presentation today. So, really wanting to tap into what do we know across Canada? What have we learned through what we've done in the US? And how do we really come together for a summit in Canada? Right now, the dates we're looking at are October 21 and 22. The 21st will be kind of a day-long intensive where we're going to really unpack it with Canadians across the country that are going to share some of their stories and kind of their experiences. And then on the 22nd, we are planning an optional site visit to the first greenhouse homes in Hamilton, Ontario. So last but not least, if you have not listened to Elevate Elder Care, it's where I talk to some of the most amazing thought leaders who are doing some of the most amazing things. So I would invite you to go to Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast app, look at Elevate Elder Care and hear some of the conversations going on there. So once again, thank you, Kathy and Aldred. Thank you, Joan, for your facilitation. And thank you to all of you who joined us today. It has really been an honor to spend this time with you. So let's keep doing it, and hopefully we'll see you all in St. Louis.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Goodbye, everyone.